Take my love, take my land, take... Oh, hi there, how you doing? Welcome back to Game Geeks, folks. I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Today's episode, we are reviewing Firefly, the role-playing game from Margaret Weis Productions. Now, for those of you who've been around for more than a minute, you'll remember that one of our first episodes that we put up on YouTube when we first made the transition from community television onto the internets was the Serenity role-playing game. So if you're getting this odd sense of deja vu, it's because Margaret Weis Productions also did the Serenity role-playing game back in, 2003, 2004? It's been a while. Now, there were some troubles with that license. Because of the nature of the canceled Fox TV show Firefly and the film Serenity, the original role-playing game Serenity could not reference anything that was uniquely Firefly. They could only reference and make game stats for things that appeared in the Serenity movie. Which, if that seems a little odd and a lot like artificial handcuffs, it really was. Now, they later went on in further books to expand that out a little bit, so you didn't just have a Badger clone with the serial number filed off called Muskrat or anything. You actually had some of the characters detailed for you there. Then the line went dormant for quite a while. Margaret Weis Productions went on to do other things with their Cortex line, including Supernatural, which we've reviewed, Demon Hunters, which we've reviewed, Battlestar Galactica, which we've reviewed. Then it got into a couple of odder things, which is where you can kind of see the beginning of the Cortex Plus line, Smallville and Leverage. They've come full circle back again. I should talk about Marvel Heroic Role-Playing because that's in there as well. They're back to Firefly. Now, this, interestingly enough, is sort of the evil mirror universe twin of the Serenity game. They're very similar, but the differences are there. For example, you can see a goatee on the book if you look closely. But the differences are there, and we need to kind of talk about what some of those are. The thing I do want to point out before we dive into some of that is none of the material directly from the Serenity movie is included in this book. If that annoys some of you, I simply point out this is not the fault of the authors or of Margaret Weis Productions. This has everything to do with the Byzantine nature of licensing of intellectual properties, something that I am not an expert in, I will never pretend to be an expert in, and so I will never criticize anyone about that. For another example of this, I invite you to go back and look at the Army of Darkness role-playing game by Eden Studios, where for that license that they got for Army of Darkness, they could not reference Evil Dead 1 or Evil Dead 2. But this isn't about the Deadites. This is about Captain Mal Reynolds and the crew of the Serenity. So first off, this is an absolutely gorgeous book. It is beautiful, filled with art, principally from the series, but with enough independent and original art to make it very interesting and very worth looking at. The pages are very well graphically designed. Additionally, you get something that I know a lot of us have been waiting for many years, which is an effective map of the Serenity verse. And it gives you an idea of what exactly is going on in that system, where you've got multiple suns sort of in Trojan and binary orbits around each other, planets and moons, etc. It breaks it down into the different suns. You've got a white sun, the red sun, and the blue sun. There's also a corollary additional sun out sort of at the very end, which includes the planet Miranda. So I take that back. You do have a little bit of reference from the Serenity movie. I just put that together. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. So if you've played Cortex before, it's essentially attribute plus skill, but the main difference is instead of a hard number for either one of them, they're both dice codes. So you might roll a D10 and a D8, etc. That changes quite a bit when you get into the Firefly role-playing game. Instead of your standard 6 attributes, this breaks it down into 3, mental, physical, and social. And for those of you who are aware and pay attention to these sorts of things, that's very similar to the Tri-Stat system, back from Guardians of Order in Big Eyes, Small Mouth, Silver Age Sentinels, and other games. So in addition to your core attributes, there are 19 skills to choose from. Things from pilot, driving, shooting, etc. You then have your distinctions. Now, the best way to describe distinctions is what they're not. They're not edges, they're not feats. The closest analog that I can think of to compare them to is the aspect from Fate. So there's a lot of Fate DNA mixed into here in various points and times. Now, your distinctions, just to give you an example of one, because the book goes through a great detail to tell you about them, include, for example, hillfolk. Ain't everybody in the verse from our civilizations, you and yours lead hard, free lives on your own. Now, all distinctions have several trigger options to choose from. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but the ones that are bad allow you to do either more things later or feed you a plot point, which are some of the currency of this game. Your signature assets start at a D8, unless you want to step it down to a D4, which gives you fewer options and increases your probability of rolling a 1. But that feeds you a plot point if you decide to do that step down. I should point out here that your attributes average to a D8 on all three. If you want to, you can vary one up to a D10 and one down to a D6, if that's what floats your boat to do so. Now, in addition to that, you have signature assets. These are usually equipment or connections that can give you an advantage in specific situations. The dice pool you roll would include your attribute, your skill, and a distinction if you can find one to work, any signature assets you might have, any from situational modifiers that might be available to you. You roll all of them, and then you add together the highest two. One thing I really like about this game is how they break down the rules through examples of play, and in individual examples how different aspects of the rules come in at different times. But they do it through an episode guide through the first handful of episodes of the Firefly series. So they break down the scenes and go, oh, this is an example of how Mal getting his ass kicked in a sword duel, and don't yell at me about spoilers, folks. It's been a really long time. If you haven't caught up by now, why in the hell are you watching this? Mal getting his ass kicked through a sword duel gives him opportunities and things he can use at a later time. Now, plot points allow you to add in more of the dice that you have already rolled. Unlike other systems, the plot points do not allow you to re-roll the handful of dice that you've got. You have to add in what is already there. Every one you roll is called a jinx. And that jinx allows the GM to set up a complication for you, which is rated usually as a D8 that adds into the difficulty of either the action that you're trying to do or subsequent actions by you and other players. I should also point out that even if you don't use the die that generates the 1, the jinx still applies. Damage is set up as complications, and you can almost see how you have the death spiral kicking in on you as you go merrily along. Once again, I want to point out that the introduction in here with the episode guide and the examples of play illustrate this in one of the best ways I've ever seen for examples of play, tying in with the visual that you can already use for those examples. The characters from the show are presented as playable, if slightly more experienced than your baseline characters included in the book. Also, you have around 25 brand new characters from different regions of the verse that you can play, either the core world, the border, or the rim, and examples for each ones along the way. There are similar rules for ships and other equipment. Ships have 3 basic attributes: engine, hulls, and systems, as well as distinctions of their own for you to juggle. The distinctions are really what make this game work, in my opinion, and some of them seem like they have more use or lifespan than others. There are some that are extremely creatively written. One of my favorites is for the reader, and it's called Brain Leech. What it allows you to do is spend a plot point, and then you can use, as a telepath, you can reach into the mind of another character in your group and use their skill for a given action. So if you've got a reader and your mechanic is injured and you desperately need to fix a piece of your ship, the reader could spend a plot point, use that, and use their skill for that action to do so. However, it does set up a complication where you start to trip over what are your memories, what are their memories, what are they thinking, how is that influencing what you're doing now. I think that is an absolutely fascinating, creative use of the distinctions in this game. A summary. This is, before I say that, there is an adventure included in the back, and one of the more interesting things I found about the game itself is with every episode, they give you ideas for how it could have gone differently, how your characters could go back to that site, interact with them at a later time, as well as NPCs from that game, from that episode itself, and others that could be involved in corollary situations. I'm in an interesting position because I've been along for the ride with the Serenity game from the very beginning, up till now with Firefly. This is an extremely well-produced game. The rules are very well thought out. They are simple and easy to use, but have enough complexity to satisfy your players. The criticism that I have most often heard thrown at Cortex games is that the engine itself is very swingy. With single die systems, Unisystem, D20, etc., you know what you're getting. You know your average is going to be this, and you have a good idea of whether or not you can succeed or fail. In Cortex, because you're throwing around multiple dice for this, it's really, you've got a lot wider range of options for do you crit fail and generate a lot of jinxes, do you generate all high numbers, etc. That only bothers me if you're enough of a math monkey that you're not willing to embrace the narrative flow of the game. The Firefly role-playing game by Margaret Weis Productions, been a while coming. It is a very nice next step evolution of this property for the Cortex system. This is very definitely in the Cortex Plus regime rather than Cortex Classic. Does that mean we have cherry Cortex or extra crispy? I don't know. So, anyway, for Game Geeks, I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Good day and good gaming.